Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. So today we're unpacking a story that hits on a theme almost all of us can relate to, but we rarely talk about it out loud. We're diving into J.B. Priestley's classic play, Mother's Day. And let me tell you, this isn't just your run-of-the-mill domestic drama. It's a brilliantly crafted story, packed with sharp wit, literal magic, and a massive wake-up call about family dynamics and the totally invisible burden of domestic labor. We're going to look closely at the plot, the incredible character transformations, and some major dramatic moments. It's absolute gold, so let's get into it.
Let's just kick things off with a question that really hits close to home. Have you ever actually stopped and asked your mother what she gets in return for her 365 days of relentless, unpaid work? I mean, really think about it. Mothers work all year round, 0 weekends off. And during festivals or holidays, their workload doesn't drop. It basically doubles. And they do the whole shebang for free, taking care of the husband and kids without a single complaint. This universal reality is exactly what sets up the central, bubbling conflict of the plot we're exploring today. Now, obviously, not all mothers handle this the same way, and the play illustrates this dynamic perfectly. On one side, we've got our protagonist, Mrs. Annie Pearson. She's incredibly submissive, totally overworked, and just endlessly devoted to a family that, quite frankly, treats her like a servant. She doesn't want a reward, just a little bit of affection. But then on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, we have her neighbor, Mrs. Fitzgerald. She is bold, fiercely independent, unapologetically smokes, drinks stout, plays cards, and, this is absolutely crucial, she's a fortune teller who happens to know some actual magic from the East. These two women could not possibly be more different. To really understand why Mrs. Pearson is so miserable, we've got to look at the people she lives with, the incredibly ungrateful Pearson family. First up, her husband, George. He's this arrogant guy who wastes his time at the club every single evening and barely speaks to his wife. Then there's the daughter, Doris, who's in her mid-20s. She is completely spoiled, talks down to her mom, and is obsessed with her boyfriend, Charlie Spence. And finally, the son, Cyril. He's lazy, expects his tea waiting for him the second he walks in the door, and throws away his money betting on horses and dog races. They all basically treat Annie like an unpaid employee, just barking orders and leaving her alone with the chores. So Mrs. Fitzgerald is reading Annie's fortune and warns her point blank that if she doesn't take a stand, she's going to lose her family entirely. But Annie, she's just way too soft-hearted to confront them. That is when Mrs. Fitzgerald drops this wild, totally unbelievable plan. She reveals that she learned Eastern magic and offers to literally swap souls with Annie so she can discipline the family herself. Annie is panicking, obviously, but Mrs. Fitzgerald just grabs her hands, looks her dead in the eye, and starts chanting this bizarre ancient spell. And boom, the magic actually works. Their souls are completely swapped. The real Mrs. Fitzgerald, who is now sitting in Annie's body, tells the real Annie to go hide next door. So we are left with this incredible, hilarious visual shock. Imagine this. The normally quiet, submissive Mrs. Pearson is suddenly sitting all alone at her own dining table, brazenly smoking a cigarette, knocking back a dark stout beer, and confidently dealing out a deck of cards. The first one to walk right into this trap is the spoiled daughter, Doris. She struts in expecting the usual royal treatment, totally blindsided by what she's walking into. She just instantly launches into her demands, whining about who's going to iron her yellow silk dress for her big date tonight, and aggressively demanding to know where her tea is. Little does she know, she's entirely unprepared for the absolute firestorm that's about to come out of her mother's mouth. Oh, Mother strikes back, and the dramatic tension here is just glorious. The new Annie flat out refuses to iron the dress. She tells Doris that she works twice as many hours for 0 pay and 0 thanks, and casually announces she's taking weekends off from now on. But the absolute killer blow? When Doris brings up her date with Charlie Spence, Annie just ruthlessly mocks the guy. She calls him buck-toothed and half-witted, saying she would literally rather die than date someone that stupid. Doris is utterly crushed and just runs away in tears. Next up to the plate, right after Doris leaves, is the lazy son, Cyril. He waltzes in wanting his tea ready and fully expecting his mom to have finished repairing his clothes. But wow, is he in for a rude awakening. The new Annie just casually lets him know she hasn't made tea, and actually, she's decided she doesn't really like doing repairs anymore. Cyril's lazy streak hits a brick wall. For the very first time, he has to march his own self into the kitchen and scrounge up some milk and cake just to survive the afternoon. So right now, the kids are in full-blown panic mode. Doris and Cyril are huddled together, whispering furiously in the corner, and they are genuinely terrified. I mean, they've never seen their mother smoke, drink, or, heaven forbid, refuse to serve them. Their only logical conclusion? She must have bumped her head and gone completely mad. It's super funny, but it really highlights just how deeply ingrained their entitlement is. They literally cannot process the idea of their mother setting healthy personal boundaries.
But the true climax of these confrontations, that happens when the arrogant head of the house, George, finally walks through the door. He takes one look at his wife and just completely loses his temper, shouting about her drinking stout in the middle of the day. He is instantly hostile. Then he arrogantly tosses out that he doesn't even want tea because he's eating at the club tonight for some special snooker match. Well, Annie sharply mocks him for throwing a tantrum over a cup of tea he didn't even want in the first place. It's a brilliant move that puts George instantly on the defensive.
Now, you have to see how ruthlessly Mrs. Fitzgerald completely dismantles George's ego here. In George's own mind, he's this highly respected, revered guy at the club, but Annie shatters that illusion by dropping a truth bomb. He is actually a walking joke. She reveals that his so-called friends are constantly mocking him behind his back, nicknaming him Pompey Umpy Pearson because he's so pompous and slow. George is devastated, obviously, and refuses to believe it. But when he demands the truth from his son, Cyril reluctantly confirms it. Boom! George's massive ego is completely crushed. All right, so just as the family is entirely broken down, Doris is crying, Cyril is stunned, and George is utterly deflated. The doorbell rings. It's the real Annie, who is still trapped inside Mrs. Fitzgerald's body. She walks in, takes one look at her utterly miserable family, and just goes into a total panic. What happens next is this hilarious, chaotic scene full of name mix-ups. The real Annie keeps calling her husband George out of pure habit, which totally confuses everyone because she looks like the neighbor. George gets mad at the neighbor's lack of manners, and the fake Annie threatens to slap his big, fat face if he yells again. The real Annie just cannot bear to watch her family suffer this kind of rough treatment any longer. Desperate to stop the madness, the real Annie drags the fake Annie aside and practically begs her to reverse the magic. Mrs. Fitzgerald agrees, but she issues a really stern warning. Do not go soft, and do not apologize, or all of this hard work will be totally wasted. So they sit back down, stare deep into each other's eyes, and Mrs. Fitzgerald quickly recites the reversal chant. In a flash, their souls snap right back into their correct bodies. So, the really crucial point is what happens next. The family slowly files back into the living room, looking terrified and deeply, deeply humbled. They are literally bracing for the next explosion. But instead, the real Annie just gives them a warm smile. She proposes a totally new normal, a nice night in, playing a game of rummy together. And the character transformation here is incredible. Doris and Cyril, completely cured of their laziness, cheerfully volunteer to go into the kitchen and cook dinner themselves. And George, the pompous guy who always runs off to the club, he happily agrees to stay home just to sit and talk with his wife. The harsh, magical lesson actually worked. Priestley's play is just a masterful mix of comedy and sharp social commentary. It shows us that sometimes it takes a massive shift in perspective, or, a little bit of Eastern magic, to finally break toxic habits. Which leaves us with one final, very real thought to take away from all this. We've seen exactly what it took to wake up the Pearson family and make them appreciate the invisible work keeping their lives together. So I leave you with this provocative question. How will you treat your mother today? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.